Well, hi again everybody. Welcome to my latest video. This video will be part 3 of my All AMD computer build. In this video I will complete a few nit-nats in terms of the hardware installation, but the main purpose of this video, after I've installed Windows 10, is to do some performance testing and some heat testing and compare it to my existing rig that I use for doing editing and just playing around with when I want to relax. Anyway, if you find something in this video that you find useful or helpful in any way, please do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Okay, the first thing we need to do is, believe it or not, pull the power supply out, at least partially. So let me get these screws off. As I mentioned in a previous video, this is really the only way that I can add a hard drive to it, which is what the objective here is. And I want to be as close to its actual using condition as possible. So my goal in this computer is to be not just a gaming computer, but also be a editing rig. So I need the 2 terabyte hard drive as the storage for doing my rendering and temporary storage of the actual files. So I have to make sure that I have that space in here. It won't run as quickly as my other computer in that regard. We'll have to take that into account when I do the benchmarking, but it'll work fast enough for a backup machine. Now I'm going to pull this power supply, the tail end, out. I am not going to disconnect any of the cables from it. Just get this out of here. So I'm just going to lie it on the side here right now, because the hard drive is going to go now inside this cage. And now I can get to the screws. Okay, so here's the Seagate Barracuda hard drive. Let me take it out of its packaging here. Seagate Barracuda 2 terabyte hard drive. That's going to go in here now. Okay, now I got 3 screws. I'm going to put this drive in. I have to put it in this orientation so that I can get to the connectors, but I'm going to put it all the way down in the bottom drive bay. There's actually room here for 3 drives, but I'm going to make sure I put it all the way in the bottom. Now the reason I'm doing that is so I can put the cables, the excess cables, on top without having to worry about any of the power cables touching the bottom of the drive. So now I take one of these screws and I put it on the screwdriver, the magnetic screwdriver. And now I should be able to get, the first screw is going to always be the hardest. I'm going to get one of these screws lined up with the holes in the side of the drive. Looks like I got one to catch now. Once this first one is started, it'll be a little bit easier. I'll try a second one. And then I'll get a third. Doing all 3 screws on one side here. Again, as I said before, I can't easily reach the screws on the other side, so I'm not going to bother. We're going to have 3 screws holding it on one side here, which should be plenty to keep it nice and steady. Make them snug, but not overly tighten. Now the drive is in here, and it's fairly solid. So at this point, I'll have room now on top of this without concern for a short to actually put in some extra cables that I may have floating around here. Let me go and get the SATA power cable and a SATA data cable and plug those in. So here's the SATA power cable that goes on this one. And then I have a SATA data cable here that I already ran through from the front. Here we go. Got my SATA data cable. Plug that in there. So now we got both cables connected, and now I can get the power supply back in. And make sure, as we did before, that the fan is going to the bottom. Very tight quarters. Now I can get the 4 screws back in the power supply. That's good. I can take these cables that I have extra and I can stuff them in on the side of the drive as much as possible. And if I have any that I can't stuff on the side, I'll have room on top of the drive. Let me push them all back in here. Okay, they're not fully dressed, but the only ones I had to put on top of the drive were the actual SATA power for the drive itself. Everything else is able to fit into this side here next to the power supply. So I think it's a pretty good configuration right now. And I should be able to get the back cover on. I'm still going to have a lot more cable dressing to do later if this is the case that is picked in terms of the winner. I said we'll see which one does better in terms of the heat test, and that's the case that it will stay in. But now it has actually closed. Now I've gotten it closed up on the back. I've reconnected all of the cables, mouse, keyboard, network, the monitor, power. And now let's make sure it still works. Let me turn this all the way around. I'll make sure that we have the monitor here. Make sure the monitor is on. Okay, it's on now. And let me try turning this guy on, and I'll see if I can go into the BIOS and make sure everything looks good. Well, the lights all light up. Let me hit the delete key, see if I go into the BIOS. And we're there. And what do I see? I see my 480 gig SSD, solid state drive. And now I see in port 4, my 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda drive. So it looks good. Now I already have installed Windows, so let me bring this over here and make sure that I can boot it and see if it boots into Windows. I do. Make sure it boots up here. But we're in Windows. Perfect. Let me log in. Take the keyboard off camera. And we're in Windows. We're doing good. Let's make sure the internet is still working. I will go into YouTube. Let me go to my channel. There I am.
Hi, welcome to my channel. Here you'll find do-it-yourself videos.
And it works. I can proceed with the testing then. Okay, before getting started with the actual testing, I do want to go back into the BIOS, which you'll see on the screen right now. And I want to make sure that the memory is running at the maximum speed that it can run. So for the MSI BIOS, I'll have to go into overclocking. And as you can see here, the current DRAM frequency is only 2133 megahertz. Now I have 3000 megahertz or 3 gigahertz memory installed in this PC. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to get into manual overclocking of the memory right now. However, there are 2 standard options that are available to you for what they call extreme memory profiling. It's sort of overclocking, but it's taken care of with some pre-programmed settings, and it accounts for all of the different things that you have to do. As you can see here, it says if I used profile 1, I would get 2800 megahertz, and if I used profile 2, I would get 2933. So I guess for whatever reason, I guess because of the timing of this particular memory, it can't get it up to the maximum speed of 3000. So I will go for, though, the best I can get. So I'm going to set it to profile 2. And now my frequency for my memory is now been adjusted, no longer in auto mode. It's been adjusted up to 2933, which is as close as I'll be able to get it. And that's the only thing I'm going to change here. Everything else remains the same. I'm going to come in here and say save and exit, save changes and reboot. You got to be careful playing with overclocking, even the memory speed. If I were to manually overclock it to 3000 megahertz, chances are I would have some issues. What those issues are, I'm not going to dabble with right now. Believe me, I've done that before on another couple of systems and it wasn't fun. Okay, so at least we got Windows coming up. I can come in here and I can log into Windows. Now, as you recall, right in the beginning of this video, I installed a second hard drive, an actual real spinning hard drive, Seagate Barracuda 2 terabyte. I got to make sure that that's initialized. So if I come over here to this PC, I right click on it and I say manage, and then I say I want to do under storage disk management. And as you can see, the second disk appears just as the BIOS said it is. So BIOS sees it and Windows sees it. However, it's unallocated. So what I have to do here before I can use it, I have to click on that, right click on it, and say create a new simple volume. I'll take the default, so I'm not going to parse it out into different segments or different partitions. It's going to assign drive letter D. I can override that, but that's fine. It's going to do NTFS, the default file system for Windows. And there we go. We now have a volume, and it's now been mounted as drive D. If I come in here and take a look at this PC now, I will see that I have a drive D. And I want to test the performance of that. That's why I wanted to make sure that it was properly functioning. Now, the next thing we have to do is make sure, this is needed by one of the benchmarks, the benchmark that you'll see me use in a few minutes called Heaven, and it requires DirectX. Now, depending on what you've loaded with your particular system, you may or may not see that DirectX is installed. So if we go into the control panel, and let's take a look, go into Programs and Features, I can look at what's been installed here, And sometimes it doesn't show up depending on which version of DirectX it is. I don't have a lot of stuff installed on this PC right now. I did go ahead and install the AMD software to make sure that we have the right drivers for the AMD video card that I have on here. But I don't see DirectX here. It may still be there. It may have come in with the drivers. There's no way of knowing that easily, so the easiest thing to do, go in and reinstall it. Doesn't hurt it. So if I come in here and I say DirectX install, make sure it's going to Microsoft.com and it's going to their download directory. Don't go to an oddball website to pull this down. You never know what you're really going to get, especially since we are currently running as an administrator at this moment. So let me go to this link and see what we got. Looks like Microsoft doesn't have any funny things to it. Secured, HTTPS, that's important. That means we got a certificate that's valid from that website, which is perfect. So I'm going to say just download this web installer, and I'm just going to run it. Tells me I have to be, of course, using my privileges as administrator. Do I accept the agreement from Microsoft for DirectX? Yes, do that. I do not want to install the Bing bar on my web browser. I don't like that. So I'm going to take that off. That's what we call bloatware. Next, initializing it. It says the installation is now complete. So I can finish the installation here. I can get out of the web browser. The sooner I get out of the web browser, the better. What I did is I have a copy that I've copied from a USB stick onto this computer originally. And it has all of the standard tests that I use. Now I want to be standard with the versions I use because so I've already run all of these tests on all of my other systems, and I want to make sure that I have the same baseline, the same version, and everything is the same. So I'm going to run those same ones here. Every so often I go and check to make sure if there's a critical update or not. They don't change that much, but it's a good thing to check. So now that I have that one installed, I'm going to make sure that I have the latest Windows updates. That's important too. So I'm going to go into Control Panel. I'm going to go into Settings. I'm going to click Update and Security. It did check today at 11:41 a.m., but I'm going to check again. Sometimes installing new software like the DirectX might actually bring in new ones. And we got a security intelligence update for Windows Defender antivirus. A very common update, comes in every day, so now we're up to date. So now the first program I'm going to run is called CPU-Z. Now there are two versions of it for 32-bit and a 64-bit computer. 32 bits are almost all gone now, but this is a 64. I got to give it permission to run as an administrator. I like to run this one first just to get a snapshot of what this PC looks like. I do not want to update. Can't grow this window, unfortunately, but it gives you a lot of information about what it is that we have installed in this computer, hardware and software wise. There's a lot of detail here. It shows the actual BIOS level. Now I got to be careful with this one. I've come to learn that the BIOS that came with this particular motherboard that I bought during Black Friday. Anyway, I understood from somebody which I depend a lot on for general information about some technology, that this BIOS that comes with it is one that I really should not update very casually. So I'm not going to probably touch this for quite some time. You could look that up yourself, the difference between the max and the non-max version of the MSI B450 Tomahawk. To look at the memory, you see this frequency here, that's the frequency of one channel of the memory. Now this is dual channel memory. I have a DIMM socket in each channel, so you double this frequency, find out what the overall frequency of the memory is, so that then will match what we saw in the BIOS. The graphics adapter is a Radeon RX 580. It can actually, this test can run its own benchmark test. I'm not going to run that one here. I'm going to stick to the other benchmarks that are more common, but if you wanted to, you could play around with this if you want to compare a couple of systems. So that's CPU ID. Now I'm going to run Crystal Disk Mark. I want to check the speed, and again I wanted the 64-bit version of it, of my two drives. One being an SSD drive and one being a regular spinning hard drive. Right now it's set for drive D. I don't want to do that one. Let me set it for drive C. Let me see what kind of performance I got. That first number is the most critical. Okay, it's coming to a close here, and we're done. Now what I'd like to do is, I got two drives in here. They're totally different types of drives, but still, just for the heck of it, I'm going to compare them right on the screen. So I like to use the Windows snipping tool, and I like to snip something like this that's on the screen. That way I can save it off to the side, and then I could run the tool one more time. But anyway, let me change this. I got to change this to drive D now, which is the one we just initialized. My actual spinning hard drive. I will go ahead and click All again. Okay, coming to the end here, just waiting for it to go to 5.505. There we go, we're done. Interesting. Obviously, the drive did sequential read, it did quite well. Writes tend to be a little bit slower than read. Anyway, those are the results. I'll put those into a final chart when I compare it to my other computer. I don't have the same drives there, but at least you'll be able to see the one that is the same, which is the solid state drive. Different brand, but you'll be able to see the difference. Okay, the next test we want to run is the graphics benchmarking. We got a couple of them we're going to run there. The first one I'm going to run is called the Heaven Graphics Benchmark. I don't have Heaven installed right now, so the first thing I need to do is to install it. So you got this file that I downloaded, the full application, and that's the installer. Click on that. I have to be administrator. A lot of people get afraid of this one with Heaven because of where it's originating from. I think somewhere in Russia. But a lot of people have tested it. They don't find any viruses or anything in here. Got to accept the agreement, accept all of the default. No funny buttons here. I do want the menu shortcut and desktop, so I'll accept those two buttons. And I will install it. It doesn't take long. And we're finished. And you see here the icon for running it. So let's see what we do here. I currently have the resolution set to, on this computer, 1920 by 1080. Can I go up higher than that? No, I can't. So when I do the comparison to my other computer, I'm going to have to use that same resolution. The program will perform better on lower resolution monitors and lower resolution screen settings. Let's see how it goes. First thing I do here when you bring this up is hit this little run button here, the gold button. Now once it starts running, I got to hit F9 right away. But right now it's loading, as you see down here in the bottom. Once it's completed loading and it looks like it's working, I got to hit F9 to go into benchmarking mode, as it indicates in the menu over to the right. There, I hit F9, so now it's benchmarking. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you see what the active frames per second are. You see a bunch of information, what the frames are going across. The big thing here is the scenes. There's 26 scenes to this. So it'll be done once we completed scene 26. We want to go through the whole thing because we're going to get a final average frames per second, and we're going to get a score that this particular benchmark puts out. Okay, we're just entering the last scene now, and then it'll come up with the final results in a moment on the screen. We can actually save it from here if we wanted to. Okay, we got a frames per second of 111.8 and a score of 2815. So I'm going to write that down for now, and I'll put it into my charts later. Let me close this program. The program is graphics processor dependent, so this will give you a real good measurement. I'm just exiting now, of how well your graphic processing unit or video card is performing. It doesn't depend upon the CPU or memory to any massive extent. It depends on your graphics card, like 98%. So with that one out of the way, let me try the last test that I want to run in regards to the graphics benchmarking, which is Cinebench release 15. So if I come in here and I run Cinebench, I only have the 64-bit version. And you'll see the previous runs over here in the history that we have. I'm going to run it again just to make sure, even though it does show my existing system that I use for editing and rendering, which is the i7-8700. I'm just going to go ahead now, and I'm going to run only the CPU given one. That's the one everybody runs. There's another one, OpenGL. I'm not going to do that one. So we're going to be heavily dependent on the CPU here, more so than the graphics. So it shows the overall performance of the CPU. This is where the extra cores help. Goes through a set of patterns, stressing the cores of the CPU quite a lot at this point. Some people like to run this test in relation to a heat test. I'm going to use something different though. And as you can see, we actually did pretty well. It's the one that's in the orange as opposed to the brown. That's the one that was just recorded. It shows a score of 1778. That's a pretty good score. And again, I will compare that to my other computer and I'll chart it at the end of this video. With that, that takes care of the graphics performance. I'm not going to save it. That would update the table that shows if I run it again on this computer. I'm not going to save it though. What I want to do now is I want to run two programs together. One is called Hardware Info, and Hardware Info, when you run it, it gives you a lot of information similar to what we saw in the CPU Z, but I'm more interested in its sensors that it has. Got to be administrator again. I'm going to run it in sensor only mode, so all I'm going to see is the sensors. I do not want to update it. So this shows the status of everything within the system right now. Now I'm going to run another program in conjunction with this, and it is called Prime 95. And I have a version 29. I'm going to go ahead and run the previous version, which is the one that I've done all my other computers with. So -5, Prime 95. Run this. Now, when I start this program, you're going to see some dramatic changes take place. Right now, if you look at how the system is dealing with temperatures and such, you see here what temperature the CPU is running at. So right now it's at 44 degrees. That's the current column. Jumping up to 50, but 44, 47 is hovering around that area. It has been as high as 59 degrees centigrade. That's really what I want to focus on for this. I want to watch the CPU temperature as I run this next test. So I put this up. Now, if I wanted to, I can actually see fan speeds and all sorts of things that also take place. The CPU fan is running at 2166 RPM. Let's see if that ramps up as we do this. That, by the way, is the only fan I have in this system right now that is PWM, that we can actually control it. The other fans are sitting here running at whatever speed they default to, which is, I assume, to be their maximum speed. The 3 front fans of this thing and the 1 rear fan that came with the case. So now when I run Prime 95, and I'm keeping track of the time, right now we're at 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Let me get to exactly 4 minutes because I want to start at the same point and keep track of it. 2 seconds? There, let's go, let's run it. It's now running. And right off the bat, you see the temperature jumped up, spiked up to 64 and a half. The fan has jumped up to 2360. I don't know how much faster than that it can go. That may be its maximum speed. We don't know until we see it. Now, what happened to this program, I started at 4 minutes. The 6 minute mark to about the 5.5 minutes to about 7 minutes is the critical time for this. That's when you'll see the maximum stress in terms of the CPU and the heat that will be generated as a result of it. And if you look here, you'll see all of the cores right now on this processor that has 8 cores to it, all of them are running 100% at every thread as well. So this thing is maxed out 100% down the line here on the left hand side in the middle. The temperature is at 70 degrees, 71.1. This is what I'm monitoring most importantly. I'm also glancing down at the fan speed. It's up to 2454. Let's see if it goes faster than that, if it's capable of going faster than that. 72 degrees. If any of them start approaching in the 90s, then we've got a heat issue. 90 degrees centigrade. And that once you get past 90, definitely as you get past 92, it starts throttling down the clock speed. And if you are watching a clock speed that's taking place here in the CPU, you will start seeing it come down. It will not be able to run at its maximum speed anymore. So right now we're running at 3.9 gigahertz over here on the left on all the cores. It won't hit that if it starts throttling, and you'll start getting some red marks on the screen too, showing that it's throttling as well. Once I start seeing it coming down, I know I'm past the critical part of the curve for the heat. 86.6, right up there, but not critical, not in the 90s. Okay, we're past 14 and a half minutes now, and it's starting to come down. Looks like the peak temperature was hit between 9 and 10 minutes. We are at 78 right now, but we did hit 87.5. The CPU fan is at 2566, but it did hit 2795. So I'm going to go ahead and take a snippet of this and save it for purposes of comparison. And that way I will save this file. I'll give it a name. Thermal take case, default fans. I'll save that in a file, put it in that folder so I can, when I move it to the other case, I'll be able to see it. And let me now bring down test. We'll do a stop on 95, prime 95 for a stop it, and then we can exit it. And as you can see, the temperature is already starting to come down rapidly here. The clock speed has also come down because it's not needed anymore. It's not being stressed. Not 100%, we're at 0% on most cores, 1.4% here and there, and we're coming down to normal temperatures. So that takes care of the heat test. Well, that completes the testing that I wanted to do. Let me show you some charts now that compare this particular system to my other editing/rendering rig. This slide shows the existing hardware that's in my editing rig. As you can see, it's pretty high-end and has a lot of cooling capacity. This slide shows the comparison results between the various hard drives using Crystal Disk Mark. The only fair test here is the middle one, where we're comparing the solid-state drives between the two systems. This slide shows the comparison between the two systems using the Heaven benchmark, which is really checking the performance of the graphics processing unit. One thing to note here is that I made sure to use the same resolution on both systems when doing these tests, 1040p. And this slide shows the comparison with the performance results between the two systems using Cinebench. In this case, the 8 cores clearly is the winner from the new system. The old system only has 6. And finally, this slide shows the comparison between the two systems in terms of the heat test. As you can see, the old system clearly is the winner here. It has many more fans to deal with the heat, even though it's also air-cooled, just as the new system is. Okay, that completes part 3 of my All AMD computer build. Hopefully you got something out of it. I think I covered a few interesting topics in this particular video. Let me know what you think. Give me a comment. Give me a thumbs up as well. But mainly, I'd like you to subscribe to my channel. So follow the little head here. Click on it, follow along, subscribe, and that would really be helpful. I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching.